Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this cross wire wrapped bracelet. And this is what it looks like from the side, but then looking from the front, you have wires crossing over your beads. So that's what it looks like. So if you want to learn how to make that, then stay tuned. And these are the things that you're going to need. You'll need your wire. I'm working with two different gauges. In my case I'm working with silver plated wire, but you can always use whatever you want to use. I've got a 1mm wire, which is the same as an 18 gauge, and then I've got a 0.6mm wire, which is a 22 gauge. You can change the gauges as well, it all depends on the look you want. Like say you can use 0.8mm, which is 20 gauge instead of the 0.6, or anything else really. So that design is really up to you. I'm just going to show you the technique. And then I've got some beads, and these are some oval shaped, drum shaped beads, some lapis lazuli beads that I have. You can use really many different shapes. Like in the other one I showed you, I used rounds and that looks really nice. So really just play about with the shapes, and then you'll need a selection of some pliers. So get your things together and then let's get started. Now the first thing you want to do is you want to cut off a length of your 1mm wire. And this is going to basically be your base wire. So I'm going to get my wire out, cut a length off the reel. It's a bit hard to say a specific length because all you need to make sure of is it's going to be long enough to go around your wrist and then to form the clasp basically. So it doesn't have to be very long. And obviously just have enough to work with. I'm just going to say something like this. Cut it. Maybe this is about 50-60 centimeters or so. It doesn't even need to be this long. I just like to make sure I have too much rather than too little. So you need to cut that length off. So you've now got your length of 1mm wire. And then what you need to do is just basically make one side of your clasp first, because that will also help basically be a stopper for your beads. So to do that, you just, towards the end of your wire, one end, you need to leave yourself a bit of space because you need to basically do a wrapped loop. It's quite simple. All I do really is find a place and just bend the wire a little bit, and then you can get anything round, or it doesn't even have to be round, it could be another shape if you want to. It's completely up to you really, but just something that's not too big but not too small. And then you just want to put that above the bend and just wrap the wire around to come back down and meet where your bend is. And then all you do is you start making a wrap loop. So you want to, the end of your wire, you want to start wrapping around the base wire. And your loop doesn't, your actual loop up here doesn't have to be 100% perfect yet, because you can just still adjust the shape a bit, because it might go a bit out of shape as you're working with making the bracelet anyway. So you just wrap this wire around a few times. Try and get it nice and neat and tight, your wraps. Just as many times as you want to. I like doing generally roughly about 3 wraps. And then when you've done that, you get some wire cutters and then cut off the excess. And then I always just get out flat nose pliers, because when you cut it off like this, the end is always going to be sticking out a bit. So a good tip is to get your flat nose pliers to just help push it in place. Because it's something, when you're making something like this, you don't want any ends or anything sticking out anywhere that can catch or scratch on clothes or skin or anything. So, and there you basically have one side of your clasp loop. And then what you can do, if you're not quite happy with the shape, you can go in and adjust it a little bit. but really I recommend doing that at the end once you've pretty much finished your bracelet, because you might end up messing it up a little bit during that. So the next thing I want to do is attach my 0.6mm wire. So I'm going to grab that. Now what you can do is you can cut a fairly long length off the reel if you want to, if you feel more comfortable working with that. But I like to, as often as I can get away with it, I like to work off the reel, because especially in the cases where you're just not sure about how much you actually need. So what I'm going to do is grab the end of my 0.6 wire, and all you want to do is attach it to your base wire. And the way you do that is just simply wrap it around a couple of times. Again, just coiling it around your 1mm wire. Make them as neat and tight as you can. And again, I like to do just about 3 wraps, because then it's on there securely. And then I cut off the excess again. And you can always just get your flat nose pliers again and just flatten down the end, like so. And then basically that wire now needs to be pushed all the way down the way your 1mm wire, the wraps that you did with your 1mm wire, where they end. You push that all the way down to there, and you're now ready to start adding your beads. So now that you've gotten all your wires ready, you now need to add your beads to your 1mm wire. So you go back to the other end, the one that's still open, you haven't done anything to, and then you feed on the beads. Obviously you want to make sure that whatever beads you're using, that the hole is big enough for your wire to go through. You just start feeding them on and just let them fall all the way down to the other end. The amount of beads that you need all depends on really the size you want your bracelet to be, and obviously what kind of beads you're using as well. So just get all your beads on there, and then I'll show you what to do next. So I've now threaded on all my beads onto my 1mm wire, and now just before we start wrapping wire around the beads, you just want to basically have a stopper on this end, so you don't risk while you're working with it your bead's going to start moving up and come off here. All I do is just basically put a bend in the wire, because there's no way that the beads are going to be able to go around that bend. What you want to make sure to do is leave a little bit of space between the last bead and the bend, because when you're working and wrapping you'll be putting wire in between the stones, which will separate them a little bit and make it just grow a little bit. So you're now ready to start wrapping your wires around your beads. So to do this, what you do is you grab hold on one end. That's another thing about having made the loop already, you can kind of use that to keep hold of. Obviously not too tight, but just gently, because it's the very first part of this is the most tricky really, because your beads are kind of, obviously can move around on your wire. Once you've gone around with one wrap on each, that'll get a lot easier when you're coming back. But basically what you do is you want to start wrapping your wire around the beads. So almost basically cross it over the bead, so not just straight up but not too much either. So you keep hold of the wire on one end, and as you're wrapping it you're letting it go around the bead until you meet the other side of the bead, and then bring your wire around the entire bracelet and then come down in between the two beads, like so. And then back around one more time, because what you do is you go around each bead once, but then also in between each bead once. So back around, and then when you reach roughly the place where you started wrapping around the bead before, that's where you want to start doing it again. So again, keep hold of one end, wrap your wire around gently till it meets the other end of the bead, and then bring it in between the next two beads and wrap it all the way around. And again, bring it around until you reach the point again where you start the wrap around the bead. So my wire is now in place to start wrapping around the bead again. So you just gently keep hold of that end, wrap it around the bead till it meets the other end of your bead, and then in between the two beads, and then around again. Now you're back to about the same place that you started before, so around the bead again, and then in between your two beads. And this is all you do, all the way up till you reach the end of your bracelet. And as I said, because you're wrapping in between the beads, it's going to push the beads apart a little bit, so it's going to make it a little bit larger. So, but at the end, before you completely finish wrapping, if you feel like it's going to be too big, you can always take off a bead before you wrap it, or even add if you need to. So just keep doing that till the end, and then I'll show you what to do next. So I've now reached my last bead that's ready to wrap. So I do the same thing, wrap it around the bead, and then just, instead of going in between because you had no more beads left, just go at the end of the wire. And I just wrap it around a couple of times, like so. So this in itself is quite pretty, really. You could always leave it at this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back around so the wire crosses over the other way to give the effect that I want. So the way that you do that is you're at the end and your wire is coming around. So I wrapped it around just a couple of times just to seal it in place. And now to go back down, I go back down with the same wire. You just basically do exactly the same thing, just the opposite way. So you want to start roughly the same place that you started on the other side, and then cross over your wire, like so. And then again in between the beads, go around again, once in between, until you reach the point where you're ready to then wrap on the next bead. Now what I recommend is to try and use your fingers to hold the wires down in the place that you want them to be while you're wrapping it. So that's the next one. Wrap it like so, and again in between the beads once, until you reach the point where you want to wrap the next one, like so, and in between. And you just keep going like this, basically the exact same thing, just the other way, until you reach the end. So do that, and then I'll show you how to finish it off. So I've now reached the end again, and I'm just left to wrap my last bead. So I do exactly the same thing, bring it around, and then basically to finish off your wire, all you do is wrap it around up here a few times. Try and do it neat and tidy so it blends in with all your other wraps, like so. And then you just get out your wire cutters and then cut off the excess. And again, like I always like to do, just grab your flat nose pliers, and where the end is, Just squeeze that down so there's nothing there to catch or scratch on anything. Like so. So that's basically your wrapping done. And what you'll find as well now, because your base wire is 1mm, and you've gone over this a couple of times with a 0.6mm, it becomes a lot stronger and sturdier as well. So get to that point and then I'll show you how to finish it off. So you now finished wrapping all your beads and you have the loop in one end that you made at the beginning. So now what you need to do is finish off this end. So on here you basically want to make the hook to go into the loop. To do this, you just want to have a decent length left of your 1mm wire in here. It doesn't have to be too long, just enough to work with. And then make sure it's as straight as possible, straighten as much as you can. And what I do is I get my flat nose pliers out and then I go a bit up my wire and then I want to bend it to get a nice angle on it. I basically want to bend it all the way around, like so, and then try and squeeze this to make the bend a bit smaller. And just do this gently and still try and keep your wires as straight as possible. And just manipulate it until you're happy with it. Exactly how much you want to try and squeeze it is really up to you, up to the look you want. So I'm quite happy with that. And then what you want to do now is find a point, go down till you have a little bit of space left before the first bead. And now the end of this, you want to make a wrap loop again. You want to wrap that around your wire to secure this in place. So just exactly like we did before, just bring it around a few times, as nice and tight as you can, as neat a loop as possible. And if you need to, you can always use some pliers to help the process along. And then just wrap it around so you basically seal up this little space and secure your hook in place. Like so. And then I'm just gonna get my pliers and help the last little bit along. And you can always cut off if you have any excess. Just gonna cut the very last little piece off. And then just squeeze that down. Just like usual, make sure it's not going to scratch or catch on anything. Like so. And then you want to just get your hook part back into position so it sits right. Because what you want to do is make sure that it sits so it matches your beads, the front part of your beads. On this end, it's not quite finished yet, but so the top part of it matches that. You go all the way along as well, so the loop on the other end also matches. So now what you want to do to just finish off this hook part is you actually want to make the hook shape. So try and get these two wires next to each other as flat as possible, and as close to each other as possible. And then I get my round nose pliers out, and then I find about where I want the loop to be. And then you can also use something else, it doesn't have to be round nose pliers, but just something a bit round, something that's not too big but not too small. And then where you place it on the round nose pliers will determine how big that loop on your hook is going to be. So I just then decide somewhere, fold the end of it back, so you now have a loop shape like this, and then I like to just kink out the very tip just a little bit, like so. So that is basically your bracelet done. You've got your hook on that side, your loop on that side, and then make sure, obviously, like I said, they're facing the right way. So if you lay it out flat, all your crosses are facing that way, up towards you. The loop is then laying down flat, and the hook, it's got the top on here, and then the hook side on the back. So you then grab it, put it to a round shape, mold it, do it gently, and then you just hook your hook into your loop. And then that is basically your finished bracelet. And if there's any adjustments left to do, you can just manipulate it a little bit. And then it'll keep it shaped like this. So you hook it up, and obviously that's how you open and close it. Just take it on, and just close it like that. And that's how it looks from the side. And you have the crosses going around the front basically. So that's how you make this bracelet. I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for watching.